Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. I am Katie Taylor, a certified child life specialist, and I'm so happy to be with you today. My week has been frazzled is a word, I think, to describe it. I have felt like up and down and in and out and energized and exhausted and just like gone through it this week. So when I come back to focus on the podcast, focus on the information that we're delivering to you, parents, families, child life specialists, clinicians, it always makes me feel centered. So I'm so happy to be with you. Today is an extraordinary episode because it is our first time having an inventor on the podcast. And this inventor is actually a beautiful friend of mine who I went to college with, and we have not connected in a very long time. But here are two special reasons why it is very cool that we are connecting in this month of February. The first thing is that we were both heavily involved with the dance marathon at Penn State, and that is how we met and is how we both came together to work in healthcare, which is crazy that Penn State Dance Marathon essentially helped us, get into our careers. And then I'm also so thrilled because y'all, Katie invented something and her name is Katie. So it's another Katie and Katie episode. I mean, you're welcome. I don't think you can have enough Katies in your life. Just this past week, I was counting all of the Katies that I do work with here. We've got Katie at Rankin Jordan. We do Katie at Christus. We have Katie Maxwell. We have so many different Katies at EWU. We have Katies all over the place. And I'm going to give you another Katie. But she is, I'm sorry, she puts all of the other Katies to shame because she invented a product that keeps babies and toddlers from having to get surgery. Yes, you heard this right. We're just at the very beginning of her basically changing the entire world. So I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce this to an audience that, number one, knows that if we can save kids from having to get surgery, it changes the trajectory of their life and reduces so much anxiety for their family, saves them from having to get anesthesia and all of the good things. But secondly, she's showing us that it doesn't always have to be pharmacological interventions or surgical interventions that can make a difference. And so we're going to be talking about her product, Naval Cradle, today. This is literally not a sales episode. This is me basically fangirling over Katie and what she's built and just completely amazed. So I just cannot wait to share our conversation. And I know you're going to love her as much as I do. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life On Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Katie, I don't know if this is appropriate for the interwebs, so I'm going to say it anyway. Do you remember the first night we fell in love?
I do. I really do.
Do you remember the drink of choice that we had together?
It was tequila, I think.
It was absolutely tequila.
Just tequila.
Just tequila. Do you still drink tequila today?
Not in shots anymore, just more mixed in a margarita. I do enjoy a good margarita with salt around the rim, but I can't say that I do any shots of tequila anymore.
Yeah, I actually can't remember the last time I did a shot of tequila, which is probably a good thing.
Mhm.
Actually, the last time I was at Penn State is the last time I did a shot of tequila.
Yeah, old time's sake. Yeah. Sometimes, when in Rome, you need to do as the Romans do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I am so thrilled to have you on the Child Life On Call podcast, Katie. You are, first of all, a kid at heart, a child life specialist from the very beginning of your life because of just who you are. And you're not even a child life specialist, but Katie and I, you want to tell everybody how we met? what we
Sure.
did?
So, Katie and I were both part of Penn State's Dance Marathon, which is the biggest student-run philanthropy in the world, and it helps raise money for children who are undergoing cancer treatment at Hershey Medical Center. So the money goes towards their treatments, the stay for the families, bills for the families, so that they don't have to worry about anything else while they're caring for their child. They can just focus on their family and the everyone surrounding that child with love and support so that they can worry about healing. And so what we did for that, did you dance at Thon too
I
at some
danced
point?
as a freshman, which is really weird.
Oh yeah, I danced as an alumni. So we did like the opposite
We did the
weird.
opposite. Yeah, I would
Um,
when I did it, it was 48 hours. When you did it, it was only 46, so
46.
you kinda
Yeah,
cheated.
I did. I totally cheated. And I wouldn't have wanted to go 2 hours more, to be honest with you. I was like, whew, thank goodness this is a lot shorter.
So
Um,
yeah, explain a little bit like Penn State's Dance Marathon. It's a year-long fundraiser, but it culminates in one weekend in February at Penn State where students about at my time it was 700. I have no
Yeah,
idea how
I
many it
think
is
they still
now.
keep it around 700 just because the building hasn't changed too much as far as capacity-wise, and so the floor can only hold so many
Well, I
people.
was I was at the rec center.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I was like so yeah, so you stand on your feet at the time for 48 hours, no
Mhm,
sitting, no sleeping. It was
mhm.
hard.
Yeah, really hard. Yep.
Would you say harder than childbirth?
Yes, my kids were super easy. They
Okay,
were
I would
fast.
agree.
Yeah. So this was, I mean, 2 full days where your feet hurt, everything hurts, fluid is pooling in your legs, and then there are these committees of people that are in charge of the food, of the entertainment, of bringing these families that we sponsor onto the stage and giving wonderful, amazing experiences for them, where they get to go out with the football team or the dance team and go see the fire hall and ride on the fire trucks and do all these amazing, really cool things. There's musicians that come in. And what Katie and I did was we were captains, and we each had a committee of about 30 other students that were our peers. And our job was to take care of the dancers for the entire weekend. So
Yeah.
our job was to make sure that they ate, make sure that they moved around, rub their feet if they needed to, give them a piggyback ride if they needed to, bring them activities to do to keep their mind off the fact that they've been on their feet for 48 hours. And so the whole year long, you're preparing events for that weekend, you're fundraising for that weekend, you're strategizing and getting paired up with your dancer and making these connections and making it so the weekend goes off without a hitch. So it is a
It's
big undertaking. There are thousands of students that are involved in it, but it was such an amazing experience. I met some of my best friends through that experience. It really shaped what I wanted to do with my life professionally
mhm.
through that experience. I'm still working with kids and still, trying to advocate for kids and helping kids be the healthiest that they can be, the strongest they can be through my work. But I also met my husband through that experience too. So it really was such a wonderful time for me. And actually, Dan and I talk about this all the time.
What?
You knew him. And so there was like this rule that you weren't supposed to take people that you knew onto your own committee. So you passed his application to me and you said,
Wait.
yes. So you are responsible for all of this.
Oh my god, I had no idea that
You
I did
didn't
that.
know. You did. And you handed it to me and you said, I can't take him because he's a friend of mine, but you are going to love him. Like I remember
And
those
boy,
words.
did you.
Boy, did I. I even married him.
Wait, Kate, why wasn't I invited to officiate your wedding?
Mm.
That would have been
Mother
perfect.
Moraller did though. Peter Clark officiated our wedding.
Alright, I'm gonna talk to Peter Clark about that. That is so amazing. I
Yeah.
back to Thon for 1 second, because this is just fun. I never get to do this on this podcast. I'm never talking with people I've had so many memories with.
Mhm.
Um, I would say Thon weekend, especially the last 4 hours, is one of the most spiritual moments I've ever had in my
Mhm.
life. Like, probably the closest to God I've ever felt is, like,
Mhm.
being with people during that time. Did you feel that
Yeah.
way?
Yeah, and it's something I reflect on frequently. because during the last 4 hours, the way they kick off the last 4 hours is they do a family hour, and they let people come up and talk. They honor all the children who unfortunately didn't um, win their battle against cancer, even though they fought really hard.
We
They
we say
honor
died here on the podcast. You can
can
say
okay.
died. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We love a dead death died here. Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But that's something I think about all the time. And one of the things, it might be a silly thing, but to me, I have been to a lot of kids' funerals. I've been to more than most people should ever have to go to for someone our age. I feel like you probably the same. And I continued to do that when I worked at CHOP, and I worked in the heart lung transplant team there. And unfortunately, some kids just didn't make it to transplant, or they got a transplant and it didn't take. And you make these bonds with these families, but seeing these tiny little caskets and watching these families just grieve the hardest thing that they ever could possibly be going through just makes me so thankful that people are like, oh, you have another birthday. And people are like, oh, women should be weird about birthdays. And I just
Right.
am always like, not everybody gets to be 39. I'm happy to be 39. I'll be happy to be
Oh,
82 if I get to be 82. Like, I get to
yeah.
have another birthday. And that's
Mm,
always the way from then on out. I've always looked at birthdays, is just because I'm so thankful. I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful that I've gotten to sit in the dark doom and gloom with these families as they went through a really rough time in their lives. But I'm happy that I got to be part of the joy of it. And that's the
mhm.
way I describe my job when I am at CHOP, when I worked at CHOP, because it is sad sometimes. I'm sure with your job too, like it's stressful
Yeah.
and it is sad. And you're a lot of times working with people going through really, really hard things, and you go into it, open up your heart to them, be vulnerable enough to live in that moment with them. But as a PT, I get to be part of the healing. I get to be part of the getting better. I get to be part of, okay, what do you want? What's your goal? I'm going to help you get there. Where there are so many other things in their way saying, you can't do this because of this. You can't go home. You have to stay in the hospital. You have to miss this birthday party because you're immunosuppressed and you can't go. Like, well, we can set up a, string in the room and we can play volleyball here with balloons, and that's great exercise. And you want to get here. Okay, well, then we need to get stronger. And so we need to do X, Y, and Z. And that way you can physically do those types of things. So it's a lot about framing it in your mind differently. And there are some sad times to it for sure, but the resiliency of children is just unmatched. And it is amazing to be a part of that. And they just want to be kids. They want to play and they want to do what they need to do. And if I get to be someone who helps them get there and make it fun along the way, I love
Mm.
that. And that's one of my favorite
Yeah.
parts.
It's such a privilege to be in the position that we have been in, and it's a privilege to be able to go to funerals alongside families and love them and miss them and care for them.
Mhm.
And I really like hearing that you as a PT feel that way too. So
Mhm.
why don't you take us back to tell us about your schooling to become a physical therapist? Because you're actually Dr. Kate Corrado.
I am Dr. Kate Corrado.
Yes, tell us about that. Wink.
So,
For those
I
of you who are listening, not watching, Katie gave us a slight little side smile with a hand under the chin, and it was perfect.
I went to Penn State for 4 years for undergrad, and ended up when I was later in high school, hurt my knee, ended up in physical therapy myself, and just kind of thought, oh, I like this. I could do this for my job. I like these people, the personality. And again, I get to be part of someone's journey for healing. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to go on to be a physician or if I wanted to be a PT. So I just kind of majored in biology and took a lot of core classes that I needed, but then some on like plant genetics and some that I haven't used so much. Um,
Horticulture, like
right.
I should have
Had to
taken
do all those
that.
too. Um, but I just fell in love with PT and helping kids get better from illnesses, as opposed to not getting to spend so much time with them when physicians are so limited in their time. Like, I get the opportunity to spend 45 minutes with someone at a time, sometimes multiple times a week. So I really liked that aspect of it. So then I went to the University of Southern California for my doctorate degree in physical therapy. I knew I wanted to work with kids. I found that passion through Thon and wanted to continue doing that. So I've worked at a variety of different children's hospitals along the way. Right now I'm split between the sports department in University of Rochester Medical Center and Golisano Children's Hospital in Rochester. I've worked at the two children's hospitals in New Jersey, the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, and my first job was actually at Oshai Children's Hospital in Buffalo, New York, where I've worked in the NICU and in outpatient. I've worked in inpatient as part of the heart-lung transplant team, which is what I did when I was at CHOP. And the nice thing about PT is you graduate as someone who is certified to treat anyone with any type of a musculoskeletal problem, but then you can specialize from there. So 4 years ago, I studied my butt off and sat for the board's exam to become a certified specialist in pediatrics. So now I have those little credentials after my name too. So I am officially a doctor of physical therapy who has a board certification in pediatrics.
Wow, that's so impressive, Katie.
Thanks.
You're such a badass. That is so cool. Because along that time, you've also gotten married, become a mom, had children of your own.
Yeah. I have twins. I'm a real overachiever.
You're a real overachiever. You just had to have two.
I have two at once.
And then you have a third as well, right?
Yes, I have. Nathan is my oldest. He's 8. And Evan and Ryan are my twins that are 6. And when Evan was 3 months old, so they were born premature, as many twins are. I actually went into labor with them at around 27 weeks, which was terrifying because having worked so much in the NICU, I know what 27 weeks looks like, and all the potential concerns that come along with that. So went into the hospital. They gave me some medication to slow down the contractions. Thankfully, I was able to keep them in a little bit longer. They were born at 34 weeks, but they were still only 4 pounds. But once you can get above 4 pounds, it's like, okay, that's a big milestone there. So they were in the NICU for 2 weeks, and then we were able to bring them home. And the feeding tubes were out. The oxygen was off. They weren't jaundiced anymore. And everything was going pretty well. And then when the boys were about 3 months old, Evan's belly button started, and it was this perfect little belly button, looked exactly like his brother. We still can barely tell the two of them apart, but like for no joke, we painted their fingernails, one blue and then one green, and we left their hospital bands on as long as humanly possible because I was terrified I was gonna mess up who was who.
My gosh.
And then Evan's belly button started to turn first to like an outie. It was just bulging out, and then it started to turn purple. And so we like rushed him to the doctor, and they were like, "Oh, that's an umbilical hernia. Don't worry about it. He'll grow out of it." And it's like, I can see his intestines like bulging through his skin as his skin is just being stretched and stretched and stretched. And there's no treatment for it. You can do, there's like some old wives' tales where you could put a quarter on it and then like tape the quarter to the belly. And our pediatrician was like, "Please God, no, don't do that. Let's just
do not do that one."
Money is so dirty. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Belly buttons are an open, like a new wound essentially, because that's where they've cut the umbilical cord. So it's an area that needs to be cleaned properly. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be left open to the air in order to heal well.
So many flashbacks of like poop on belly buttons.
Yeah, it's just, and right, there's all these little crevices in there, and it's just not. It's not an area that it should be covered. Right. So, being a PT and knowing how babies' bodies work and how they work differently than adults, and what muscles in their core they need to develop in order to crawl and to roll and to sit and all these things, they cross all right through the belly button. And our pediatrician and to her credit, that's what the standard of care is. The standard of care for this type of issue is to do nothing and hope that they grow out of it. So we tried that for a little while, and I'm not one to do nothing. I'm going to just like pick at things and try my own things and things like that. And it just kept getting worse. There was twice we took him to the emergency room because if it gets too hard, it's called it becomes incarcerated is what it's called. And it's that the intestines have like twisted on itself and it's no longer able to be easily compressed back in. And that's an emergency situation. But it's more common in preemies. It's more common in babies with constipation, which is so many of them, especially formula-fed babies. It's more common in any type of a child that has a genetic condition that causes their tone to be altered. So their muscle tone is either higher or lower. But it happens. I had no idea that this was even the thing that could happen, let alone that it happens to 20% of the babies within their first year of life, which is 800,000 children in the United States
That's a
alone.
lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
So thankfully, a good portion of them do grow out of it. But unfortunately, Evan was not one of them. So when Evan was 1, they say by the time if they're up and walking, if it hasn't closed, then they'll sign them up for surgery. So from 3 months to when he's 12 months, I was told to do nothing, watch him just be uncomfortable. And
pray it doesn't get worse.
And just pray it doesn't get worse. And it definitely didn't get any better. For a while, it looked like a little shark fin, like a little purple shark fin sticking out of his belly. And I'm like, if this is like this for his whole life, he's going to get made fun of if he's going with his shirt off at the pool. Like, kids are mean sometimes. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I did a bunch of research, because we were at the point where we're like, okay, well, we'll sign him up for surgery. And they usually do surgery for this when kids are about 3 years old, because that's when anesthesia becomes safer for more elective type surgeries. So I'm like, great, now we have to wait another 2 years. So I did a bunch of research and actually ended up started teaching an integumentary course. So it's a course on skin disorders and skin diseases and things, which is at a PT school, but kind of random because that's not in the area that I practice. I'm a pediatrics PT. Right. But they need someone to do it. And I have done wound care in the NICU, and I have done wound care in outpatient rehab with burn victims. And I have done little bits here and there throughout my career. So I said, sure, I'm happy to do it. I really want to get into teaching. And the more I learned about our bodies and how wounds heal, and that a wound is not only on the surface. If you break a bone, that is a wound to the bone. It's any area in our body where the function has been disrupted in some way. That's a wound. So you can have internal wounds. It doesn't mean that it's going to be bleeding everywhere like a skin wound would be. But essentially, a hernia is a wound to that internal lining of our stomach. And when that wound opens, the stomach contents can kind of bulge out and destroy your beautiful little belly button and then stretch out that skin. And we know from pregnancy, your skin can stretch a whole lot. It doesn't always go back, right? And especially if it's in a small targeted area. So even once this worked for Evan, he had like a little skin flap for a while. And thankfully he's grown into that as well. And that was something I didn't know, is with the surgery, they don't do anything with the extra skin either. You still are just told to wait and grow into it. Wow. So when we have a wound, this is my little wound diagram.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. When we have a wound, and say it's on your skin, if you were to heal by what's called primary intention, they stitch you back up together, and then the two edges of that wound are lined back up, and that preserves the function of your skin, which is ideal. And there's minimal scarring, and all the edges line back up together, and it heals much faster. The other option is if you aren't able to get stitches because the wound is too big, or you just aren't able to get that type of care, it stays open and it'll fill with scar tissue eventually, and will heal, but you're going to be left with a big scar, and you're not going to have the same function of the skin because you don't have all those layers anymore. That little bowl or whatever has just been filled to the top with scar tissue. So then I'm thinking, we've got this wound, and it's being left open. And if we could get surgery, that would close it, and it would be closing by primary intention. It would preserve the function of that area. But no one will do surgery on these babies because it's considered elective. So how can we pull those edges together externally while allowing them to still move and to still breathe and to still do all these different things. So there's some research out of Japan who's been working with adhesive strapping and kinesio tape and things like that a lot longer than we have. And I found this amazing PT, Esther Deroux, out of the Netherlands, who started to do some work with umbilical hernias. And she does a lot of work with kinesio tape and was doing something similar, but there's no product on the market that you could go get this done with. So there's a variety of different ways to do it, but there's nothing that you can just buy and use on your own or that pediatricians could recommend. So I made my own. I just started cutting these things in my office, in my basement, and wherever, and started trying them on Evan. And I would take pictures every week and just say, I don't know, we'll just see if this is going to work. And week by week, it got so much smaller. It was amazing. Our pediatrician was shocked. She said, you have to make this a product available for everybody else. You have to make this available. Let me know when you get it done, and we'll back you on it like 100%. And we'll start referring people to you or something like that. And I was exhausted, right? Because I've got twins and one's 17 months older. And I was like, yeah, okay, lady, sure, why not? So fast forward a few years later, when I've got my sanity back and my normal sleep schedule back, and still just thinking about this. And other people have reached out to me along the way saying like, hey, can you make these for me? Hey, can you make these for me? I know somebody who has a hernia too. And just realizing how common of an issue this really, really is. I reached out to a variety of different companies. I got a patent lawyer. I ended up getting a patent and a trademark. I almost had a contract with someone, but that fell through. So I decided I'm still going to go through with this on my own. So I got it all registered with the FDA in 2023. And then the website is up and running so that people can advocate for their children, because as moms and as PTs, that's a huge part of what I do in both of my worlds. And especially when it's my own son, the idea that the best advice to me was to do nothing was awful. I felt so helpless. I saw him struggling, and there was nothing I knew that I could do about it. And then I'm going to the people that you're supposed to go to that'll tell you what to do as a parent when you don't know and something's wrong with your kid. And their best advice was do nothing about it. So it's so simple, but kind of the same way if you go and you get steri strips put over a very small cut and it helps pull it together. That's what this does.
And what's the name of it?
It's called the navel cradle.
The navel cradle.
Yes. So
it's adorable.
Thanks. So it's shaped like an X on purpose, and the hole in the center, I'm just going to peel it off.
Yeah.
That way. The hole in the center goes right over the herniated area, and it doesn't have to fit completely over. Even if it's like a very large hernia, it can just go right over the top and just press it down just slightly. You never want to like force anything through the sides of it. And then these tails go up at a side, kind of make an X pattern. And the way that kinesio tape works is it stretches as your body moves. So as the baby moves, and as they breathe and as they wiggle and giggle and squirm and roll and do all the things as a PT I want them to be doing, this tape is going to stretch along with them and help activate their oblique muscles and pulling those rectus muscles back together so that it can heal by that primary intention type of model. Wow. But it's not going to restrict them in any way. It's not like a big bulky hernia belt. It just goes right on their skin. They can wear it for 5 days at a time. And it's just this stretchy piece of fabric that has a very gentle adhesive on the back. So they can get a bath in it. They can go in the car in it. They can swim in it. And it'll go right underneath their shirt. You can show it off if you want to, but if you want to cover it up, it's easily covered up.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's kind of my journey to get to this point in a nutshell.
And how can people, if they want to get a navel cradle or see it or share it, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so the website is www.navelcradle.com, and it's NAVEL navelcradle.com. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram, and there's so many great testimonials on there from parents who have used them. I've sent these out to over 75 kids in 26 states and 7 countries. So
Wow.
they're definitely out there. But like I said, it's such a common problem, and it's so amazing to hear from these moms and how they felt helpless, just like I did, and being able to help empower them to advocate for their kids and try something a little outside the box. Just because there isn't a treatment for something yet doesn't mean that there's never going to be one, and we won't know if there's one
Mm.
until, we try some of these things, especially something that's so low risk like this is.
It's so inspiring because there's several moms I've had on this podcast before, and there's a gap in something that needs to be filled. And there's no entrepreneur like a mom entrepreneur or inventor like you that figures it out for their kid and then wants to share it with others. And it's not without a lot of work. I also think about what you save kids from, and that's surgery. And we know that surgery is not an easy experience on parents, not an easy experience on the kids themselves. Comes with its own set of risks with anesthesia
Mhm.
and surgery. And
And
so
the success rate
ultimately,
for the surgery, from what I can tell, is not great. There are so many times where it recurs and then they have to go through surgery again. And so I hate when medicine is so reactive and they're just waiting for something to go wrong or something to get worse and then address the problem, when there's so many ways that we can be proactive in medicine. And this to me feels like a proactive treatment. If you can address the problem when it's a very small problem and not a chronic problem, it's so much easier, and you avoid all the sequela down the road of all the other things that can go wrong.
and these could work on NICU babies as well.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the youngest baby I've had it on is someone who's just a week old, and still
Wow.
had the umbilical stump. And it worked so great. It worked in like 3 or 4 days for her. Whereas someone who is a little bit older and will be moving around more takes about 6 to 8 weeks if the hernia is relatively new. And then
That's
for
so
my
fast.
yeah. And so for my son, who was 13 months, so he had had that hernia for like 8 months when we started. It took 2.5 months for his to heal. But we were at the point where the doctor was like, if it hasn't healed by now, it's not going to. So that was so exciting to see.
That is amazing, Katie. I'm sure you have big, big dreams for Naval Cradle. We're getting you at just the launch, just at the beginning of your journey. Where do you see Naval Cradle moving on from here?
So the next big hurdle for me is going to be some clinical trials. So I have all these amazing, amazing parents that have put their trust in me and in my expertise to try something new and to take that step outside the box and to be able to try that. But most physicians won't recommend certain treatments unless there's official clinical trials behind them. So that's my next step. And then ultimately, what I think this could really have so much a benefit for is that in the US, I feel very fortunate that surgery was an option for my child. And it was one because I have good health insurance through my employer. I was able to get at not an astronomical cost. But
Right.
there are so many places in the world where that is not an option. And so that's where I've gotten a lot of I've sent these to Tanzania. Like that was an amazing
Wow.
opportunity where she's just like, this happens all the time here, and we don't have any options or people to contact. So that's kind of the nice thing about social media. I've gotten to connect with a lot of people all around the world that I wouldn't have ever gotten to connect with out there. But being able to at least have it as a choice for a treatment before you go to surgery, or if for places where surgery is not as easily accessible, especially when it's for one that they would deem more an elective surgery, getting this in bulk to people out there because it's such an inexpensive, wonderful option when the risks are so high for surgery and it's so expensive for things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer to try, in my opinion, but I can't wait to see the clinical trials come out and have you back then and just have you share the wonderful things that you've done in your next invention that you'll be working on.
Yeah, I have one for Legos.
Ooh, the child life specialist in me likes that.
I know. We have too many
Oh, well,
Legos
thank
all over the floor. I end up shoveling them to get them back into their buckets and things. So I want to have one that sorts them out for me.
Perfect.
Who knows?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing what you've done and just for the hard work it takes a project like this to fruition and see it through. I know you're going to make such a difference for people. Are there
Thank
any
you.
other questions or stories that you wanted to share that you weren't able to?
Um, No, other than, in going through all of this with my kids, they're old enough now to see the work that I'm putting into it, and when, like, the shipment of naval cradles arrive, because they get made officially now. I'm not making them on my own anymore. They get made officially in
Wow.
Toronto for me. But when they arrive, it's really fun to see them, and then watching the websites and the pictures and, watching Evan's belly button evolve, watching them do that. And then the other 2 boys are like, "Well, why don't I get to be on the website? Like,
Why
why don't
didn't
I?"
I have an umbilical hernia? It's
Right.
no
"Oh, why
fair.
does Evan get all the attention?" And so,
Right.
but watching them see, like, because they know what his belly button looks like now, it looks perfectly normal. It looks just like his
Wow.
brother's does. And so that was the way we could tell them apart before, and now we're back to not being able to tell them apart at a distance.
So cute. Well, thank you so, so much for sharing all of this.
And thanks so much for having me. This has been great, and
Yes.
it's just nice to
Yes.
see your face.
Yes, you too. You too. Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.